keep the conversation lively. All right, so as we approach St. Valentine's National Love Holiday, we begin with a discussion of lust. And what of lust? And why is it a deadly sin? Do we lust for love? Where did lust come from? Where did these sins come from? And how do we manage the sin of lust? Marty Kaplan, I don't know if he's here tonight, but gave a wonderful presentation on wrath, the first of this series. And he covered the history of the 7 deadly sins, but it's been a while. Some of you may have missed his great presentation, so I thought a brief reminder might set the stage for our discussion tonight on lust. So the 7 deadly sins are a construct, obviously, of the Catholic Church, and they were formally codified in the 6th century by Pope Gregory I. But they originated in the teachings of a 4th century Greek monk living in Constantinople in Egypt, Saint Evagoras the Solitary, or Evagoras Ponticus. He describes what he calls 8 evil thoughts that we as humans must overcome. And loosely translated from the Greek, they're gluttony, prostitution, fornication, avarice, sadness, wrath, dejection, boasting, pride. And note that sadness and dejection are considered evil, which I thought interesting. One of Evagoras' students, John Cassian, or John the Ascetic, brings this list of evil thoughts and Evagoras' teachings to the church in Europe in his book, The Institutes. And for the next 200 years, they become fundamental to Catholic confessional practices. And his changes with language translates from the Latin as gluttony, lust, fornication, avarice, greed, sorrow, despair, wrath, sloth, vainglory, pride, and hubris. In the 6th century, Pope Gregory I is on a mission to convert paganism in Europe, particularly of the Anglo-Saxons. So I think having some clear behavioral guidance was a useful tool to him for conversion. So he takes these 8 evil thoughts and he makes a few changes. He combines sorrow with sloth, vainglory with pride, and then he adds envy, which Billy Ray gave such a wonderful presentation on last month. So this gives us with the 7 deadly sins in their current form, and I've ordered them the way we deal with them in this series as wrath, pride, gluttony, envy, lust, sloth, and greed. There's an animal associated with each sin. The lion is wrath, the peacock is pride, the pig is gluttony, the snake is envy, lust is the goat, sloth is the snail, the toad is greed. So tonight we confront the goat, a supremely stubborn animal who will eat absolutely anything from your newspaper to tin cans, not to mention ram you with its head whenever it feels like it. Now, Christian philosophers separated the 7 deadly sins into 3 groups: appetite, irascibility, corruption of the mind. The lustful goat lies in the appetite category. And I think we probably can all agree that if we pursued our appetites without some regulation, society might fall into chaos. The 7 deadly sins were used to avoid that, to ward off bad behavior, curb evil inclinations before they festered and rose to the level of dangerous behavior. And the lustful goat was one of the most dangerous. But all 3 of these categories of sin in the mind of the church were thought to answer to pride. Religious thinking from the Greeks forward sees pride as the root of all dangerous behavior, or as Ecclesiastes says, vanity of vanity, all is vanity. And when pride gets mixed up with lust, some really bad things can happen. Religious laws associated with behavior are problematic, to say the least. Historically, they've punished loving relationships, suppressed artistic expression, and free speech. However, much has been done wrong, even though much has been done wrong in the name of religion, we can thank Judaism for a good deal of our modern legal system. And maybe the 7 deadly sins still can alert us to the social discord that can come from our unfettered appetites. The goat is a disruptive beast, to say the least. That said, it is strange the church considered the appetite group of sins as the least severe because they're the abuse of a faculty we share with animals. But come on, what the hell? We've been on this planet for 2 million years. Surely we must have evolved to rise above our baser instincts. So how are we wired that these sins of appetite, particularly lust, are so common? I mean, we admire many things about lust. We use the word to express it as a compliment. He, she has a lust for life, a lust for adventure, a lust for food, a lust for knowledge, or in terms of libido, he's a lusty devil, she's a lusty wench. So where does this positive view of lust come from? Or to pick up on David's title for our series, why can't we live without lust? Wikipedia describes lust as a psychological force producing intense desire for an object or circumstance while already having a significant other or amount of the desired object. And while our use of the term in practice has evolved, it comes to us from the Dutch and German word, which translates as pleasure. And pleasure is something that affects us chemically as well as psychologically. We are, in fact, wired for pleasure. One of our great leaps of evolution was that our eyes could see color. And this allows us to see when food is ripe. The color red particularly triggers activity in our brain, which leads our hypothalamus to release oxytocin and dopamine, which motivates us to pursue the pleasure of calorie-rich food. Advertisers prey on this using the color red to stimulate us to buy things. Daniel Kahneman, in his Nobel Prize-winning work on economics, Thinking Fast and Slow, bases this on our two cognitive systems, automatic and reflective. Our inherited instincts are activated by the color red to seek food, and so is our libido. Our desire for the survival of the species can be triggered by red lips. There are other triggers as well, such as beautiful, healthy hair, abdominal muscles, biceps, breasts, childbearing hips, good teeth, etc. Our automatic, fast-thinking brain system goes into action, motivated by an inherited expectation of reward, and releases testosterone and estrogen, and pleasure reinforces it. The neuroscientists Morton Kringelbach and Kent Berridge, in their essay Neuroscience of Desire and Desire Regulation, describe pleasure this way. Pleasure is at the heart of many human experiences, and they suggest that conversely, a lack of pleasure or anhedonia is a major component in mental illness, such as depression and anxiety. Pleasure, they say, can be thought of as evolution's boldest trick for sustaining and nourishing interest in the things most important to survival. So without pleasure, we may fall into the evil thoughts of sadness and despair. So what's a reasonable amount of pleasure from food, or in the case of carnal pleasure, lust? Buddhism describes life in its four noble truths as suffering is inherent in all life. Suffering is caused by desire. There is a natural way to eliminate all suffering from one's life. The ending of desire eliminates all suffering from one's life. But should we eliminate desire completely? Even the historical Buddha Siddhartha argued for a middle way of dealing with desire. I mean, you don't have to give up life's pleasures completely. In fact, the loss of desire was added to the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders as hypoactive sexual desire disorder in 1980. Losing what we call libido can be painful, though perhaps unavoidable with age. Age may tame the heyday in the blood, as Hamlet suggests to his mother Gertrude. Oh, wait, that's a drag, huh? We don't have to lose that option for pleasure in mutually consenting relationships, do we? I mean, how can we keep desire alive but manageable? According to Kringelbach and Berridge, our brain processes pleasure in three distinct phases: wanting, liking, and learning. And wanting, in the case of lust, is the experience of arousal. This differs somewhat in men and women. The ability to become aroused is easier for men, apparently, perhaps because we are the less complicated animal. In an exhaustive study of people's internet habits, Ogi Agas and Sai Gadam, authors of A Billion Wicked Thoughts, found that men tend to have a greater sex drive than women. They suggest that men's greater sex drive may be partially due to the fact that their sexual motivation pathways have more connections to their subcortical reward system than in women. In other words, men's brains are designed to objectify females. And while they say that these behaviors don't necessarily warrant being viewed as admirable, they're at least sympathetically understandable. Now, women, on the other hand, tend to experience the wanting phase from their study in a more complex way. Ogas and Gadam found that women are far less turned on by erotic images than by particular kinds of relationships. These fictive relationships can inflame their imaginations with a strange sort of romanticism, however outrageous or hazardous their fantasies might be. Think vampires or 50 Shades of Grey. So the wanting phase of desire leads to the second phase, which is liking. And in the case of carnal lust, a sexually satisfying experience, usually the form of an orgasm. A recent study by the Journal of Sexual Medicine produced the following statistics about the liking phase of lustful desire. Note the disparity in men and women, as well as in same-sex partners. Well, after the liking phase, we have the third phase of desire. This phase is learning. Or will we do this again? This commits the experience to memory. Memories are complex and elastic. Bad memories or negative experiences can suppress behavior. Positive experiences can encourage repetition. And it's important for me to say right now that my cursory research on this, there's much less information about women's libido than men's. And even though I had two sisters and I have two daughters, I will admit that I know precious little really about women, certainly of their experience. However, what I read suggests that men typically remember the sensory experience of a climax. They log it in memory as an option for the future. This is likely due to our procreative brain. Women, however, are more likely to experience a diminished libido in the learning phase. Even with the reward of a climax, the learned experience can produce negative reinforcement, leading to a loss of libido. And loss of libido, as we've noted before, can lead to depression and other mental disorders. The FDA did a study on low libido in 2014, and I found a quote from a young medical student describing her antidotes to low libido, which I thought was interesting. She says that she counters low libido by thinking about her boyfriend, switching her boyfriends, chocolate, coffee, certain episodes of Grey's Anatomy, the phrase a little to the left, the phrase not so hard, the phrase I love you. Her conclusion with love seemed important to note. At 63, I can confirm that a low libido that your libido itself does tend to diminish with age and can lead to unhappiness. The film Tie Me Up, Tie Me Down by Pedro Almodovar has a memorable scene. Victoria Abril is visiting an old film director who's in a wheelchair watching pornography. He seems unaware that it's on when she arrives and continues watching, not in a puerile way, but more as a nostalgic pining for his youth and vitality. I found that scene striking and even profound when I was in my 30s when I saw it. But for those of us subjected to the ravages of time, there is some good news. Hamlet may be wrong. The heyday in the blood may continue longer than he thought. A recent study on adultery showed that 26% of men and 10% of women admitted to committing adultery in their 70s and 80s. So here's to the heyday, without the adultery, of course. Kringelbach and Berridge suggest that the path to a healthy sex life or libido may have to do with modifying our liking and wanting phase of desire. So what does that mean? Do we, like Siddhartha suggests, find a middle way of wanting, match with a middle way of liking, or do we just remember the liking without getting lost in the wanting? I don't know, I'm confused. It seems that a healthy libido does help with well-being and happiness, though. Lust for consensual carnal pleasure is one of the great gifts of life. But unregulated lust is a real problem. I mean, it has to be regulated. And this leads me to the flip side of our title, which is why we can't live with lust. Even the Romans shut down their bacchanal festivals in the first century because it was breeding chaos in their rather libertine world. It was a bad form of lust, rife with wanting and liking, absent positive associated learning or learned bad consequences, selfish memory driving them to repeated lustful pursuits. I've often seen notorious philandering celebrities interviewed late in life about their past and saying, I have no regrets. And I think, I don't know, you did some pretty bad stuff. I mean, you should feel some regret. I mean, I certainly look back on my youth and have regrets. The experience of learned regret over my loss of control has been a pretty good regulator for my more selfish pursuits. Kringelbach and Berridge describe the middle process this way. They say that human brains notice, remember, think about, and plan for pleasure beyond causing the pleasant feeling at the moment. And all of this can be considered a form of pleasure coding in the brain, for which the expanded prefrontal cortex plays especially important roles. Now, our prefrontal cortex is something we know is not fully formed until around age 25. Rental car agencies use this as an age restriction for renting a car. So perhaps youthful indiscretion can be explained as a lack of proper brain development. I'm trying to get my cortex up to 25, but keep slipping back to 18. The Catholic Church had to think about lust and answer a lot of questions about it as to what kinds of lust were sinful. And St. Thomas Aquinas, the 13th century philosopher and theologian, tried to offer some guidance on this in his Summa Theologica. He addresses lustful behaviors this way. So he says about wet dreams, well, that's not really a sin because it's not in control of the individual. Adultery, yeah, this is bad. This produces a special kind of ugliness and a lot of difficulty. And the biggest one is that it can wrong the offspring by calling into question the legitimacy of a woman's children. Simple fornication, by that he means just sex for pleasure. Well, he really wasn't for that, but he didn't think it was as grievous as a lot of other forms of lust. But it could induce adultery or the seduction of others. Rape, slam dunk. Violent act, clearly a sin. Seduction, the problem he has with seduction is that it implies the potential damaging of property. By property, he means the daughter of a father who might be ruined or her prospects in society might be lessened. And then unnatural vices. By this, he's talking about bestiality, sodomy, or sexual positions the church thought were not okay. So as you can tell from Thomas Aquinas, the Middle Ages was kind of a difficult time for women because women were viewed as the procreating property of men. And the social developments in this period reinforced this through the rise of a warrior class of knights. Knights were able to gain a new level of status in society above the peasants through their service to the aristocracy. And with this rise developed a double standard where the knights could have sex with anyone during their military exploits, while their wives were back in the castle protecting the family line. And the double standard even created another class, the bastard class. You may know the English prefix Fitz means bastard son of. So Fitzpatrick as a surname means bastard son of Patrick, and so on with Fitzgerald, Fitzwilliam, etc. And Fitzroy is bastard son of the king. Well, these are proud names in Europe and America and Australia and places like that today. But they're all a product of a misogynistic system based on patriarchal lineage. Now, all due fairness to the Middle Ages, this had been a standard since antiquity. Women throughout most of Western civilization had basically three options in society, and that was wife, nun, or whore. And while prostitution was frowned upon as sinful, it was less grievous transgression than adultery, rape, or seduction against male property and family lineage. So the oldest profession survived. And as the Middle Ages gave way to the Enlightenment of the Renaissance and the Elizabethan era, Shakespeare endeavors to uplift the role of women in society. But he ends almost all his comedies and some of his best female characters with marriage. He can't escape marriage as an essential social construct. In Measure for Measure, the character of Isabella has to trick Angelo, the surrogate duke, into thinking she slept with him to escape his lechery. He's punished only by marrying his former fiancée Mariana, while Isabella gets to be married to a sort of feckless Duke Vincentio. Yeah, thanks for nothing. A similar situation happens in All's Well That Ends Well, where a worthy young woman of lower breeding pursues a classist jackass who marries her but refuses to consummate the marriage. He then goes off to sow his oats with prostitutes in foreign lands, and when Helena discovers him trying to deflower a local girl, she tricks him into thinking she's the local girl he's been chasing, has sex with him, finally consummates their marriage. All's well that ends well? I don't think so. What, you got an asshole for a husband? As You Like It, Midsummer Night's Dream, Taming of the Shrew, all end with marriage. Because of this patriarchal system, the sins associated with lust fall primarily to men. The literary expressions of female desire that emerge in the 19th and 20th century in literature lean heavily on women's lack of agency in society, sold off for dowries, trapped and abused by unloving, philandering husbands. Whatever actions they take up, to my mind, seem to avoid the red letter of sinful behavior. I mean, their actions fall more squarely on the abatement of suffering through any form of pleasure. Madame Bovary, for example. And even when certain female characters in literature become grasping or manipulating as they try to circumvent their social dilemma, think Fanny Price in Of Human Bondage, Marie Arnoux in Flaubert's Sentimental Education, even Cleopatra. Somehow these actions feel less like lust, more like greed, using their bodies to achieve some control of their lives, maybe a sin of appetite, but not lust. So today, while we still promote marriage, it's not the chief regulator of our unbridled lust any longer. We accept divorce, we condone homosexual relations, we condone sex for pleasure in and out of marriage, and we recognize women as having an equal place in terms of lineage, hyphenating their surnames, keeping the ones they were born with. Now, I do note that Judaism has always tracked lineage through the mother, but there was no lack of misogyny in Judaism either. Read The Red Tent by Anita Diamant. So after 500 years, we're still suffering through this patriarchal legacy. The Me Too movement has exposed the worst examples of lust as a negative impulse. So then what do we retain today from Aquinas's list of lustful sins? Adultery? Yeah, I think so. Rape? Definitely. Seduction? Based on the circumstances, sometimes, yeah. Bestiality? I don't know about you, I got to draw a line there. So how do we, as a modern evolved species, allow for carnal pleasure as one of life's gifts while regulating against the bad behaviors, people like this guy, Dominic Strauss-Kahn, rapist, this guy, Harvey Weinstein, rapist, this guy, Jeffrey Epstein, rapist, even the bad behaviors of some people we admire. John Kennedy, adulterer, seducer. Bob Fosse, adulterer, seducer. Bill Clinton, adulterer, seducer. Of course, there's these guys, right? Yeah, just plain gross. And this guy, yeah, I don't know about stupid. So while there are fewer examples with women, women are not immune from predatory behavior. There's this one, for example, Ghislaine Maxwell. And the Atlantic magazine, in an article titled "The Understudied Female Sexual Predator," cites the 2014 study of 284 men and boys in college and high school, and they found that 43% reported being sexually coerced, with the majority of coercive incidents resulting in unwanted intercourse. 95% were female perpetrators. And while I found no examples of bestiality, I'll reference Seth Rogen in the film 40-Year-Old Virgin, where he's sharing his exploits in Tijuana with Steve Carell. He was looking forward to the thrill of watching a woman have sex with a horse, but it didn't turn out like he hoped. He says, to be honest, I kind of felt bad for her. I mean, we all felt bad for her, kind of felt bad for the horse. So while we can't live with lustful appetites that lose self-control for personal reward without thought of consequence, Kringelbach and Berridge suggest we look for good pleasure coding. We need to use our prefrontal cortex to create proper pleasure codes without losing our lust for life itself. Marriage, in my experience, does help with that, though it's not the only way. I do still have a tendency to objectify women, but I also deeply admire many and see beyond their physical form for their greater value. In Ogus and Gadam's A Billion Wicked Thoughts study, they found that even though men are wired to objectify women, they are most aroused by authentic expressions of female pleasure. And they'll reject behavior that they find false. No disrespect to Meg Ryan and Harry Met Sally. So somewhere in the male fast-thinking brain is an understanding of sharing pleasure, maybe even empathy. Dante described lust as disordered love. Maybe because I'm a romantic at heart, or just that Valentine's Day is approaching, but I think love in its most altruistic form is a good option to regulate lust. And while it may seem simple or corny, I think the golden rule's a good thing too. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you is a pretty good governor for our wanting, liking, learning, pleasure cycle. The pursuit of pleasure when we ignore its impact on others is where sin may lie. Our ascent to the apex of the animal kingdom comes from our ability to work together as a group. We collaborate, we share stories, we create belief systems to explain our existence. We help each other survive and find well-being and happiness. Kringelbach and Berridge concluded their essay on desire this way. Happiness springs not from any single component, but from the interplay of higher pleasures, positive appraisals of life's meaning, and social connectedness, all combined and merged by interaction between the brain's networks of pleasure and meaningfulness. Achieving the right hedonic balance in such ways may be crucial to keep one not just free of distress, but even to achieve a degree of bliss. So let me conclude by saying happy Valentine's Day to you all. I wish you pleasure in your meaningful relationships, free of the unsavory aspects of lust. But if you got a willing partner and you're up for it, then, have at it. God bless you. Before I conclude and turn this back over to David, I thought I'd leave you with a couple of questions that we can, that may prompt some discussion. One is, what about material lust, our lust for things that we already have enough of? And how do we feel about monogamy today as a regulator of our lustful appetites? Is free love something we need to maybe be a little more careful about? Anyway, thank you so much. Really, really an honor to get to participate. So take it away, David.
Oh, that was awesome. Jim, that was awesome. That was very, very provocative and certainly very lively. And I like the great illustrations and the constantly moving screens. Does anybody, Jim started with a couple of questions. Really, it was extremely entertaining. Jim started with a couple of questions. Does anybody in the group have any questions that they want to open up with? All right, well, if nobody else has, I have a question for you. The idea of material lust, is that ever good? Like if you, lust, when most people talk about lust, I think we tend to think these days of sexual lust. And when you mentioned things like lust for life and stuff like that, that's good. The lusty devil and the lusty wench seemed a little less positive in my, I have described somebody as having a lust for life. I would think twice, certainly, before describing somebody as a lusty wench. Certainly, if I valued my life. Yeah. But
well, I think that's my Shakespeare background, right, where that was considered a good term. But yeah, I hear you.
So does anybody want to weigh in on the idea of material lust versus other? Because that seems like totally in no way, there's no positivity to it at all. With personal or sexual lust, one can see the upside of that, but material lust, it seems like it's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, the eight evil thoughts evolution, the Latin word was luxuria and fornicatio. So fornicatio meaning having sex, luxuria is like this sort of passion for nice things, right? You have a coat. Why do you need more than 2 pairs of shoes? So what Imelda Marcos, for those of you that remember her in the Philippines, what she did, right, where she had just rooms of shoes, was considered, oh, that's just perverse, lustfully perverse. And I think that's what they mean by material lust. And we're very comfortable, and it gives us pleasure to have nice clothes and a nice house and aesthetics. So, it can go too far. What's too far? That's really what I was thinking. People might want to think about.
Along those lines, I've noticed on here that our mutual friend Susan Merson, who is in New York and has asked about the lust for power. Or Susan, or feel free to chime in. Or are you saying lust for power or lust versus power? Susan?
Hi guys. versus.
Hi, Susie. I love you. I
I
miss
love you
you.
too, and I lust after you too. Hi, Beth.
I'm not sure if you're lusting after Jim also, or you're lusting after the two of us, but we can discuss that afterward.
Afterwards, okay. Lust versus power. Lust versus power.
So this whole codification is like this idea of pride and appetite, right? I mean, I certainly think Cleopatra was lusting for power, right? But my point was she sort of had to, right? Because she was constantly trying to defend the rights of her family line to maintain control. So she's seducing Caesar and seducing Antony. And there seems to be some historical suggestion that all of that was for her to secure her position of power. So, and I think some of the literary references that I mentioned are doing the same thing. Women looking to finally be empowered, to find power. And certainly men, I think that Harvey Weinstein, part of what gets him off is he feels like he's in power and he wields it for his own personal pleasure, which comes from his pride and his power and position. So I guess power, it seems to me, has sort of the implication of pride that the sort of Caesar's slave told him when he came running into Rome victorious, all glory is fleeting, right? So be careful.
Right.
Don't feel so good about your power, right?
Yeah, I think it's interesting also, you talked about appetite, appetite, power, lust, all that stuff. Pretty interesting stuff.
I think
Well done.
Amy had a question. Amy, do you still have a question?
Yeah. You saw me. Well, I was thinking about lust, material lust, and I was thinking, there's lust for power. A lot of us think about that. I mean, Donald Trump is a great example of lust for every kind of material thing, and of course, power is not just a material thing. But I was thinking about during the COVID pandemic, so did I have a material lust? And it turned out I did. I had a material lust for vacuum cleaners. And now I'm thinking, after Jim's talk, I'm thinking like, it's almost like promiscuous sex. I now have, I thought I had 4 vacuum cleaners, and then a friend of mine said, have you forgotten the Roomba? And it's true, I have a Roomba. So how about that kind of collecting lust, the lust? I have friends who have collections of typewriters. They're meaningless. They don't mean anything. There's this kind of gathering of material goods in our society. And of course, the vacuum cleaner is an exception because it's a necessity. But but there is this, and it's like the Wizards of Wall Street. There's the capitalist desire to accumulate more and more. And do you think that's part of a lust, or is that just greed, or one of the other deadly sins?
No, I think we need to look at it. I've read some article that was just talking about how everybody has to have the industrial version of a refrigerator now. They have to have like something that's in a fine kitchen for their stove. And you really don't. I mean, you can cook a turkey in a cheap oven from Home Depot. You don't have to have the latest decor or whatever it is. And look, I'm a victim of that. I have a decor oven. I have high-end appliances.
Kind of lust, isn't it?
And it is. It's a kind of excess that can be bad, right? We should give our money to David Levinson at Big Sunday instead of buying these expensive toys.
My latest vacuum cleaner, which is a stick cordless, and it is clearly geared toward lust. The way it's described is like a torque. It's for men who don't like to vacuum, and it's got a lot of power and torque, and it's like a sex tool, and a weapon. I swear, it's like a weapon. It's crazy.
But on the contrary, it seems like they are marketing it toward women. They're describing like the ultimate guy or something.
You would think, except that it really resembled in its advertising the Mercedes ad narrated by what's his name, the British actor Benedict Cumberbatch with that fabulous voice, and it was all about torque and power. And you felt that a man might be buying it, yeah, really.
Jim, when you talked about, I thought it was really interesting the way you mentioned that women's literature is very much about, when lust, it's about agency as opposed to when men write about lust. Like, can you think of any examples of women's literature not so much about that? And was there a time when that changed?
Well, I said at the top, I'm certainly not an expert on this subject in that regard, and talking about what women's experience is. I mean, I certainly think there are plenty of examples of predatory women, that sort of the great, characters that I was dragging from the 1800s and 1900s I thought their positions were defensible. As we have gotten to a place now where I think there's a little more equanimity that's being developed, even though we're still victims of this patriarchal system, I think the question is really about women's lust, and maybe I'm getting off of what you asked, is that how much is that pleasure seeking and objectifying thing? Where is that going wrong for women, and where are they just asking, hey, I just want to have a voice in this thing?
There was something like in those books, like, and anybody else feel free to weigh in, books like Fear of Flying or some things like that, the post-feminist, after the feminist revolution happened in the 60s and early 70s and stuff like that, came about women seeking pleasure. Was that really about women seeking pleasure, or was that a way of women seeking agency? Which was that? Is that women trying to write in a way men had traditionally done, or was that a variation on a theme?
I defer to Susan Merson and Ruth Adler to answer this question.
No, I think Eric E. Jung was looking for power, and and I think that putting lust in, I mean, that's why I think lust and power is so interesting, especially when it comes to the women, because you can make the woman bad if she wants too much sex, in the olden times. But really, it was just a way of just trying to get yourself equal in the world, right? So now everybody can have whatever they want. So including boys, girls, dogs, vacuum cleaners, and what do you and then so therefore what is then lust becomes very separated. Then I think it is valuable then to get into the conversation of, is lust something
I can't start
that we want that we can't have, or something like that.
Ellie, I know you have your hand up.
Must be, put your hand up under
I'll put my
reactions.
hand up under reactions.
Hello, person talking. I don't know.
That's
who it is.
Ruth Adler. Ruth, what do you think?
I think about women and lust, and I always go literary. I think I would start with Maggie Nelson and the Argonauts, where she opens her book with her husband, who's a trans man, choosing the size of the dildo that he decides he wants to use that night when having intercourse with her. And she talks about a closet full of dildos and how this is a great way to live, and how wonderful it is to be married to this person who started as a woman but is now a man and really knows how to pleasure. And I really think of lust as much more like how we're living it today, not how we think about it psychologically. And I'm so sorry, I choked on my dinner. Excuse me. But lust is something that we live every day, as I think, Jim, only too well. People lust after your wife, and why are they lusting after your wife? And you lust after someone else's wife, and why are you lusting after their wife?
Wait, and you lust after me, right, Ruth? I mean, you
Absolutely. Why did you have to embarrass me like that, Jim? That is really, really not appropriate under these circumstances.
You guys, I want to interrupt this steamy conversation.
Hi, Ellie.
I had my hand up.
Just saying. So I have a lust for speaking right now. But I want to say, while I'm silencing Ruth, that I would like to propose that lust be taken off the list of the 7 deadly sins for the 21st century.
Oh.
Because this is why, like lust, I can see why in a pre-birth control era, when it was almost impossible to protect yourself against STDs, lust was really a problem. It could cause all sorts of extra kids and diseases, and it was, you know, it was a gateway to problems. But now, the only time, I mean, I think we can all agree that unbridled lust or lust for too many vacuum cleaners, or in my case, fleece leggings, is a problem. But like anything in excess is going to be a problem. Like I like Cheerios, but if I ate Cheerios all day long, that would not be good. But Cheerios are not the 8th deadly sin. And I'm going to argue that lust should be now taken off of the list of 7 deadly sins, because I frankly see no downside. If someone chooses to feel lust all day long and have sex with willing adult partners all day long, like I actually don't have a problem with that.
Yeah, but the key word is willing.
Okay, willing, but that's not lust, that's rape.
Well, but
It is
keep in mind, Ellie, that the sins were not necessarily bad. They were things that led you to do bad things. So lust can be good, right? You can't live without it, but you can't live with it when it goes to rape or deflowering some young girl so that nobody wants to marry her, or somebody that, or a young boy who, you know, is going to be screwed up sexually for the rest of his life. I mean, I think that's the implication, is that it doesn't, it's an odd linguistic way to look at it, in that the 7 deadly sins are not sins until you use them inappropriately, right?
Let me ask a couple of questions for clarity. So I need to go a little way out to come to my point. So give me a little latitude.
Okay.
Yes or no, is money good or evil?
Evil.
Evil. Those are our only choices.
Painful. Promotes a lot of unhappiness when you don't have it.
Nice.
Money's neutral. It's neither good nor evil. It's what you do with the money or your pursuit of it that is evil.
Maybe.
Money is the way in which, if we can't barter, we use a green piece of paper that says, you have nothing I want as a service, so here is a green piece of paper that you can go get something. It's our desire to have too much of it. It's our desire to have so much of it that we can buy all of the vacuum cleaners with fleece leggings in the world.
The
Okay.
image of a vacuum cleaner wearing fleece leggings is forever in my consciousness. So,
Okay, so money is neutral in the fact is what you choose to do with it. It's actually, we could argue, it is a symbol of societal good, because those people who have more, that's what one group of, what is it, the Mercers argue, that the more money you have, therefore you're good and you're better than other people because you're smart. I don't necessarily cotton to that, but the point of it is it's a neutral thing. Just like lust can be a neutral thing. What you choose to do with it is what you choose to do with it. Paul Caponegro said, he's a Guggenheim, 2-time Guggenheim recipient and MacArthur Grant artist, that the reason why conservatism started to grow in this country and we got so uptight is that sex started killing us. So that what we have is we have the lust for desire to interact with people and be intimate, but all of a sudden, because of that unbridled lust and unchecked lust, we created a situation which that started to kill us, and then we reacted in the opposite direction. My point being is that most of the things under lust are neutral. It's just what you choose to do with it. And I would agree with putting an asterisk next to it on the 7 deadly sins and making it kind of like a minor infraction deadly sin.
yes, Amy Willens. since I
Well,
see you.
Yeah, of course, I still want to talk again because I was thinking about there are some younger women here. And, I have 3 boys, young adult men, and they certainly don't talk the way about women's lust that the older grown-ups, the vaccinatables here, talk about women's lust. I mean, for my boys, and I'm sure for everybody's girls, they think of girls as having equal lust and equal libido and equal sexual desire for whatever is the object of their desire, as a man does. And I think a lot of the things that, Jim, you were talking about, the studies you were talking about, are a little bit retro when they come to women's libido, like they're talking about women my age. Even when I was in the 1960s, probably I repressed libido the way all women my age did, coming out of the Victorian era in the 1950s. But I don't think girls do that anymore. And I just wanted to sort of speak up for any younger women who are here and say, if you're not going to talk to the oldies the way they should be spoken to, I want to just say that I may just like vacuum cleaners, but I'm sure the younger women here like other things.
So I see Steve Yano, who's on my screen. So Steve, go ahead.
This is a very interesting conversation. I've had some interesting experiences having did some work for Trojan many years ago, and that was interesting research. And one of the pieces of research was the largest paid, this was for a big media company, but the largest paid website, paid to be a part of was Adult Friend Finder. And Adult Friend Finder is, people paying $29.99 to be part of a site where you could basically meet and lust for as much as you want. And it's all about pushing boundaries. There was no age bracket. I, having gone on and done research, or spent a lot of time on Adult Friend Finder, among others. I mean, Tinder and, Bumble and those, forget about that. If you want to find the perfect person, someone who's got this type of body and this type of race and, wants to do with this, and, if you want to talk about dildos and everything else, welcome. And you could actually search according to exactly the person you wanted. And it still exists, of course. But this idea of pushing boundaries, and you talked about turkeys and cooking turkeys. I mean, you could push a boundary by trying to, roast a turkey in a big fancy oven or do it on a barbecue with charcoal. It's pushing a boundary how you cook it. Think also, you made a comment about vampires. So think about it. Is the monster get the girl, which I always thought, and you think of Bram Stoker's Dracula and you saw, you see that lustful experience, but was it about love, or was it really a woman's desire to be taken by a monster? Is it being lusted after, you want a monster to overtake you? So is the lust and desire something that's almost immeasurable but personal to everyone in how they measure it, which is why in a site like Adult Friend Finder, do they think it's promiscuous? There are partners and couples that want to look for other couples or single women or however it is. So it's, I agree with, I think, Ellie. Lust should be taken off the list.
So let me,
you should be able to push your boundaries as long as they're healthy boundaries, emotionally, sexually, how you do that. So I just wanted to.
well, thank you for that, Steve. That's really interesting. I mean, I appreciate you bringing up some of the things that my wife functioned as a bit of an editor for me on this. So I've tried to stay away from things that were a little too on the titillating scale.
We can talk afterwards. We're adults in the room.
That's
so
fine. Yeah, we can talk
room.
privately. But I am really pleased that Amy brings this up, because I read that fictive relationship business and I thought, well, I don't know, maybe their study is nonsense. But I certainly think we're at a very different time now in terms of the ability for women to be, open about their appetites. But all of this discussion about lust and not being on the list, I just want to go back, even where it comes to money, even where it comes to material wealth. What sort of struck me about what I was looking at is this idea of pleasure, that life without pleasure is very difficult for human beings, and that we need it for our mental health. We need reinforcements of reward to make us get up in the morning, even if it's just, I love the sun in the morning, I love the view of the dawn. And this is something that we are wired, that keeps us going, that keeps us alive. And so food, stuff, appetites, power, all of these things start to give us, and we reinforce it in our mind in this learning phase, and we plan to get it again because it made us feel good. It made us feel like life was affirming. And so I think a lot of what maybe Steve, you're saying, and Ellie, is that, come on, let people have fun, let people have some pleasure. I mean, but it's not bad pleasure as long as people are willing. The question is when we become too unrestrained in our pursuit of pleasure that we begin to harm others and sort of fracture our ability to function in social groups.
It's a shared experience.
Should be,
You know,
not always,
isn't
but
that-
certainly
isn't
should
that
be.
Isn't that a solution? It's a shared experience, which is why these sites exist and others, that
Yeah.
people concur, they want to have a shared experience. And I guess the equal is depending on how your brain is, but there's nothing better than sharing an experience with someone you, however it is, people first, you know.
And if those neuroscientists are right, then we pleasure code with a proper amount of, you know, modification to go, this is good, this is not harming people, this is mutually beneficial, right?
I think maybe what you want to do with some of it is not necessarily take lust off the list, but have it, and with any of these things, where it goes to in its positive way and it goes to in its negative way. And lust in its positive form is good and acceptable. Lust in its negative form, where one person is experiencing pleasure, well, like Harvey Weinstein may have been motivated by lust, but the person at the other end of it was not experiencing pleasure. So it goes to a bad way. And I think certain things, because it's interesting, like lust for life seems positive. Lust for other stuff, if you say that sexual lust can go either way, lust for money, I think that just tips into greed. And I think that's like jumping ship into another sin.
Mm-hmm.
I would say. It probably goes out, and I don't know where vacuum cleaners fit in. I think that's a new, like, it's an amendment to the sin. Does anyone else have anything else? I see that we're going a little past 8 o'clock at this point. Does anyone else have anything else they want to add or ask Jim? Well, I got to say, this was a great discussion. Jim, you did an awesome job on this. This was very provocative.
Thank you, Jim.
And really a wonderful presentation. And thank you very much for that.
If you like Jim, I would recommend unmuting so he can hear or see your applause.
Yes, everyone is muted. So
Bravo.
Yay!
Thank you.
The perfect representative.
Thanks for coming.
and it's nice to see everybody.
Why?
Please know we put these on YouTube so you can see it. You can watch again. You can watch the ones you've missed. We'll be back again on Wednesday, March 10th with Sloth. So after this, everybody get everything that they need to get out of their system. So you can be slothful after that. And it's really nice to see everybody. And please now check us out at bigsunday.org if you want to be involved in any or all of the things we're doing. We'd love to have you. So if that's it, there's a lot of things here on the side. Jim, thanks. That was really awesome. And it's great to see you again, my friend.
Thank you, my friend.
Thank you all very much. Stay healthy and well, and enjoy your shots too.
You don't get them in New York. Jim Holmes, I'm going to call you up. Jim Holmes.
Call me. I miss you, Susie.
Hang on, Susan Merson, just hang on.
Okay,
Thank you,
thanks,
Jim.
Hey,
Jim.
hey, how are you, darling? It's so great to see everybody.
Thank you.
Oh, my whole
Bye,
other life.
everybody.
Hey,
Thanks, everybody. I
Sylvia.
appreciate it. From New York.
Thanks so much, Jim.
My pleasure. Take care.
Okay.
Bye, everyone. Happy early Valentine's Day.